Hey, this is Chad with Thriving Canine. I'm continuing the behavior modification series that I'm trying to put together here. So this will be part 3. We did part 1, we talked about aligning consequences, right? Your positives and your negatives, and making sure that those are not getting messed up, which sounds so simple, but it happens all the time. So you go back, if you haven't seen that, you can look at part 1 for that. Then part 2, we talked about exercise, the importance of getting the dogs enough exercise, but not only enough exercise, but the right types of exercise. And we went into a little bit of detail about that in part 2. So part 3, another thing that's essential for your behavior modification program is socialization. And, so oftentimes behavior problems have to do with antisocial behavior or something. It could be fear or aggression. Aggression can come from fear. It often does. And or sometimes just over-exuberant, excited behavior. But all of those any of those things right there can often be deal breakers for people. A lot of dogs wind up getting rehomed or dumped at the shelter or even euthanized because of these things, because their lack of proper socialization has snowballed until the behavior becomes, intolerable for people. And then you're getting into really serious rehab. But if we socialize properly, we can really avoid that. But even if we get to that point, we still have to need to deal with socializing the dog. It just becomes more difficult or less safe. So I want to talk about, first of all, what is socialization? And then I want to talk about the 3 types of socialization. And then I want to talk about the timeline for socialization. There's 4 parts to a timeline, or 4 possible timelines for that. Okay, so that's the overview. So let's get started right now with what is socialization. A lot of times people think of it as just going to the dog park or the dog playing with other dogs or socializing with other dogs, which it is, but that to me is only a small part. To me, socialization means basically environmental exposure, exposing the dog to anything and everything the world has to offer, so different sights, sounds, smells. A lot of this will happen naturally when you're walking your dog and exercising your dog the way we talked about in part 2. But just getting out there and being exposed to different things. So, and that does include primarily people and dogs. That's the main thing, and people being the number 1 most important thing, because you can try to avoid dogs if you have to, but even that's difficult. Then you can get into also cats and other animals, but going out at nighttime, walking on different surfaces, walking in the rain, seeing people with umbrellas, going to shopping centers, if you don't live in the city, maybe taking your dog to the city. If you don't live in the country, taking your dog to the country. Just giving your dog an exposure to a wide variety of things. Okay, but there's 3, so let's talk about now the 3 types of socialization. So one I already kind of mentioned, like people usually think, I take my dog to the dog park so he's socialized. That usually is more about interactive socialization. So interactive is the first one. That means that the dog is interacting with the environment or people or other dogs, or interacting with the environment or whatever's in the environment. So playing with other dogs, sniffing around, exploring the environment, so on and so forth. So that is interactive. Now then you've got engaging. Now, what I call engaging. But now when I say that, I don't mean engaging with the environment. Now I'm talking about handler engagement. So this is where you're taking your dog to a variety of places, different distractions around, different activities going on, different noises going on, and having the dog now pay attention to you and play games with you or do obedience drills with you or what have you. So, obviously all of these things, it should be said, we're trying to give the dog positive experiences with all these things. Of course, there might be some stress involved here and there, but we don't want to have traumatic levels of stress. A little bit of stress is okay. A little bit of stress makes you stronger, builds calluses, so to speak, right? So, but we're trying to make these experiences as positive as possible, or as stress-free as possible. I don't necessarily agree that everything should be absolutely stress-free. I don't even know if that's possible, but you want to prepare your dog for the world and for life. So a little bit of strengthening to, tolerance of a little bit of stress is actually important. It's just the art of it is getting that just right where we're not overstressing or traumatizing the dog, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. These are just general concepts now, remember. This is overview. This series is about the general concepts, and I might get into more specifics as I go on. Okay, so anyway, that's it. So, but the engaging, and if you can get the dog engaged with you around these distractions, it not only helps you with your obedience training, but it gives you the ability to help the dog avoid some stress sometimes. Ooh, there's something that's a little bit too distracting or too scary over there. The dog's not ready to check it out or engage with that, but they can engage with you. Hey, come over here, pay attention to me, play with me, and then that's still going on, but becomes more in the background, if that makes sense. Okay, so then we've got what I call just watching the world go by, okay, or observatory. Observatory socialization is where we're not really doing activities together, but the dog is also not going and engaging with the environment or interacting with the environment, but that we're just kind of chilling. This would be like you're hanging out at the coffee shop or something like that, right? We want the dog to learn to be able to just hang out and relax and watch the world go by and not be worried about it, but not have this overwhelming need to go engage with it or interact with the environment as well. So it's kind of the opposite of the interactive one, okay? But we're not distracting them or making them engage with us in order to do that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, I want to talk about the timeline, the different timelines that we have for socialization. Now, the most common one that's really popular nowadays that everybody hears about is you have to socialize your puppy, right? So that's early socialization. So early socialization tends to mean everything before they're 4 months old, like from 16 months and prior to that, even starting back with the breeder. If the dog comes from a really good breeder, they will have already started some socialization with the dog, handling the dog, exposing the dog to different things and noises. The dog's probably being whelped and raised in the home, so they're getting used to the sounds and smells and activities in a household, the appliances, vacuum cleaners, blenders, all that sort of thing. That would be awesome if you're lucky enough to get that sort of situation. But typically from the time you get your puppy, which would be around 8 to 10 weeks old probably, and so you're going to start right away with trying to expose them to things as much as you can safely. There's always the concern with the vaccines and the viruses and whatnot, but you want to do whatever you can safely. I'm not going to go too much into that right now, but there are things you can do and still feel safe, okay? But the early socialization, and then from 12 to 16 weeks, that what they call the critical period or the sensitive period starts closing. That window starts closing. So the dog's brain or the puppy's brain development is already starting to sort of solidify and saying, this is my world, this is what I know, and then the unfamiliar can start to become scary to them, okay? So that's your early socialization. Then the next timeline would be ongoing socialization. Now, this doesn't get talked about as much. So a lot of times people think, oh, I socialized my puppy and now I'm all done. But you really want to continue because you're going now into the adolescent phase, which would then go into the adult phase. So as your dog is going through these phases, you want to continue putting some effort into keeping the dog socialized, staying out in the world, getting positive experiences and exposure to different things. Old people, kids, people wearing hats, umbrellas. You want to continue all of those things. Cars, motorcycles, you know what I'm saying, the whole world. You want to keep doing that. A lot of times people do the puppy, put the effort in a puppy and then kind of relax, and the puppy doesn't really go anywhere, and they're not going out of their way to try to have people come over to the house or anything like that, so it starts to pitter off, okay? So then so that's your ongoing. So you've got early, ongoing, then the next one would be what I call revisiting or revisitation. So this is for when the people have dropped off. They did their puppy socialization. They did maybe young adolescent socialization, but at some point they started dropping off, and now maybe the dog's starting to have a little bit of antisocial behavior of some sort. So we got to go back. So now we're just revisiting. But at least we have a foundation to go back to revisit. So the dog was socialized but starting to become antisocial. And if you can catch that early, that's the best. So as soon as you start noticing that, got to get on it again. Oh, we got to start socializing. I thought we were done, but we're not. Okay? Fair enough. Hopefully that's making sense so far. Then the final timeline would be your rehabilitation. So this is when you're dealing with dogs that they're really antisocial, or they're fearful or aggressive or what have you, probably because they didn't have any of those previous timelines put in place. They weren't socialized early. They weren't socialized at any point until whatever it is we're jumping in here. And maybe there's an unknown history. Maybe they were and we don't know. But this is when things have really gone off the rails, and now we're rehabbing. Okay, but you still need, if they've got antisocial issues, you still have to work through it. But we have to be more careful, depending on that. Really, there's a lot of variables there. Sometimes we have to use muzzles and leashes, and we have to be very careful about how we do it. Okay, but anyway, that's your timeline. So, but if you have an opportunity, the earlier the better, and then continuing on. Don't just think you're all done. That's the biggest mistake puppy owners make. Okay? So, but anyhow, this whole socialization concept, it's really, really up there when we're talking about behavior modification, or if we're getting our behavior right, building our dog's character from the beginning. It's right up there with the exercise, in my opinion. So far, just a recap. Part 1, we talked about aligning our consequences, make sure we're not confusing things. Then number 2, exercise. Plenty of exercise, enough exercise, but also the right type of exercise. Go back and watch those videos if you haven't seen them. And then socialization is also a huge one. Okay, so that's it. That's part 3. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much. I hope you found that helpful. I will catch you next time. This is Chad with Thriving Canine. See you later. Peace.